Okay, so you're prepping for this big meeting on the UK economy, right? And suddenly everyone's like, budget this and CGT that, and, throwing around all these terms like NACs. And you're just sitting there like, whoa, hold on. I need a crash course here.
Yeah, I've been there.
Well, you've come to the right place because today we're doing a deep dive into the UK's upcoming budget.
All right.
And we're going to give you that insider knowledge, like straight from the perspective of accountants.
Yeah, accountants are really on the front lines. I mean, they see how these policy changes actually play out in the real world. It's almost like they have a crystal ball for the economy.
It's true. And, we've got some great excerpts from Business and Accountancy Daily to kind of guide us.
Okay.
So let's just jump right in. It's Wednesday.
Big day.
Big day. And all eyes are on Chancellor Rachel Reeves as she gets ready to deliver her first budget.
Talk about pressure, right? Oh, yeah. The stakes are definitely high for Reeves, especially with, Prime Minister Keir Starmer and his recent comments about supporting, quote, working people. So everyone is waiting to see how those, words actually translate into concrete policies.
Right. And the article highlights some key areas that are, likely to see changes. Pensions, capital gains tax, that's CGT, by the way. We've got inheritance tax, or IHT, employers' national insurance contributions, NICs, fuel duty.
Wow.
And even a possible VAT addition on school fees. That's a lot to unpack.
It is a lot. And the fact that the article uses the phrase tough budget, it suggests that accountants are kind of bracing themselves for, maybe some potentially significant shifts.
Okay.
Likely including tax increases.
Tax increases.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see why they call it a tough budget, but why these areas in particular. Is the UK facing some, serious financial challenges right now?
Well, yeah, think about it. The UK, like a lot of countries, is dealing with inflation, the possibility of a recession, and of course, there's the ongoing impact of Brexit.
Right.
So, the government might be looking at a combination of spending cuts and tax increases.
Yeah.
Just to try and, stabilize things.
Okay, that makes sense. So when we talk about things like, let's say, CGT, for example, what kind of impact could these potential changes have? A lot of our listeners are probably wondering how this could affect them personally.
Well, CGT is applied to the profits you make when you sell certain assets, like a property or shares. Right now, the UK's CGT allowance is it's actually pretty generous. So you can make a certain amount of profit before you're taxed, but if that allowance is reduced, that could generate a lot of revenue for the government.
Okay.
But on the other hand, it might also discourage investment, which,
So it's a bit of a balancing act for the government, right?
Right.
Trying to generate that revenue without, stifling economic growth.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a complex equation with a lot of moving parts.
Now, let's go back to Starmer's working people comments for just a second. I'm curious to get your take on, the economic implications of this rhetoric. Could it signal, a shift in the government's whole approach to taxation?
It's certainly possible. If working people are truly the priority, like Starmer says, we might see a move away from taxes that mainly impact wealth and investments. Things like, CGT and IHT. And instead, a greater focus on income-based taxes.
So potentially less emphasis on taxing, assets and more on taxing earnings.
Right.
That would be a pretty big shift in policy.
It would be, but we have to remember that this is just, speculation at this point.
Right.
We'll have to see how the budget actually unfolds.
Okay. So we've got this backdrop of economic challenges, the potential for tax increases, and this, interesting focus on working people. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty. When the budget is announced, what are the key things our listeners should be watching for? What are the real indicators of, the direction this government is taking?
You're right. It is a lot to keep track of.
Yeah.
But if I were you, here's what I'd be paying close attention to. First off, I'd keep a close eye on any changes to those income tax bands and rates.
Okay.
If we see the personal allowance increase or that basic rate threshold bumped up, well, that would kind of align with this whole helping the working people idea.
Right.
But, if those higher rate tax bands jump, that could mean the government's looking to pull in more cash from, those higher earners.
So income tax changes, those are a big tell.
Yeah.
What else should our listener have on their radar?
National insurance contributions are another one to watch closely.
Okay.
Specifically, any increase in what employers have to pay.
Right.
That could have a pretty big impact on businesses, especially those small to medium-sized ones.
Right. Because it's basically adding to the cost of, employing people.
Exactly. And then, we can't forget about fuel duty. It's been frozen for a while now, but what if they increase it?
Oh, yeah.
That would hit consumers right in the wallet. And it could even push inflation higher.
Oh, I remember the last time fuel prices went crazy. Nobody was happy about that.
Yeah, it's definitely a pain point for everyone. And then there are the big ticket items that are always, creating buzz,
Yeah.
CGT, IHT, and pensions. Changes to these could really shake things up.
Right.
For investors, homeowners, and, folks planning for retirement, if the government's really serious about shifting wealth around, this is where they might make some bold moves.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you right, we've got income tax, national insurance, fuel duty, and then those big three. CGT, IHT, and pensions. That's a lot to keep track of, but, at least now our listener knows what signals to watch for.
Absolutely. Paying attention to these areas will give your listener a much clearer picture of where the government is headed and how these decisions might, impact them, either directly or indirectly.
Speaking of impacts, we've been, focusing on the UK so far. But, in today's global economy, it's all connected, right?
Yeah.
What happens in one place can ripple outward. So how might this UK budget potentially affect, the global stage?
That's a great point. The UK may be an island, but it's a major player in the global economy.
Right.
So let's explore some of those potential ripple effects. First, think about currency markets.
Okay.
If this budget is seen as something that strengthens the UK economy, the value of the pound could, get a boost.
Mm.
And that has implications for international trade and investment flows.
So a strong pound, that could make things more expensive for people buying UK exports, right?
Right.
Which I guess could hurt UK businesses trying to sell their goods overseas. But then again, imports might become cheaper for UK consumers.
You've got it. It's not just about the pound either.
Right.
The UK is a big financial center. So any changes to financial regulations or tax policies, those could influence global markets as well.
It's like a domino effect, isn't it?
Yeah.
One change here can set off the whole chain reaction elsewhere.
Exactly. Now, another angle to consider is foreign investment.
Okay.
If this budget creates a more welcoming environment for businesses, that could attract foreign investment into the UK.
More jobs, more economic activity. That sounds like a good thing.
Potentially,
Yeah.
yes. But we have to remember, foreign investment can be a bit of a double-edged sword.
Oh, okay.
It can bring benefits, but it also raises concerns about, foreign ownership and control of key industries. It's about finding that balance.
Makes sense. So we've got currency markets, financial regulations, and foreign investment potentially being impacted by this UK budget. What else is on your radar?
Well, the UK is part of the G7, right? That group of some of the world's biggest economies.
Mm.
The UK's policies can, influence the G7's agenda and even shape global economic discussions.
So is it the UK takes a step and then other countries kind of follow suit?
It's not always that simple,
Okay.
but there's definitely influence and collaboration happening within these international forums.
Like a giant economic brainstorming session with the world's most powerful players.
You could say that. And we can't leave out the global implications of the UK's, climate change policies.
Mm.
This budget might include measures to encourage green technologies and investments.
Mm.
Actions like that could inspire other countries to follow suit.
So the UK could be leading the charge in the fight against climate change.
They certainly have the potential to be a trendsetter in that area.
Yeah.
Their actions could, send a signal to the rest of the world and maybe even accelerate the shift towards a more sustainable future.
Wow. We really went from a deep dive into the UK budget to a global discussion on currency, investment, international relations, and even climate change.
It's all connected.
It really is amazing to think about how one country's budget can have such, far-reaching implications.
Yeah.
We started by talking about prepping for a meeting on the UK economy, and now we're discussing global trends and the fight against climate change. Who knew a budget could be so fascinating?
Right. It just shows you how interconnected everything is these days.
Well, I gotta say, I feel a lot more prepared for that meeting now.
Good.
We've covered, the potential areas of change, the reasoning behind them, and even how those changes could impact the global landscape.
And don't forget those key things to watch for when the budget is announced.
Right.
Those are your real clues to understanding where the UK government is headed.
Absolutely. But before we wrap up, I want to leave our listener with a little something to, ponder. We've talked a lot about what might happen, but let's Like, flip the script for a moment.
Mm.
Imagine you're Chancellor Reeves. What would your top priority be for this budget? Like, what's the one thing you'd make sure to address, even if it meant, making some tough decisions or maybe even facing, like, political backlash?
That's a great question to consider.
Yeah.
It really highlights the complex choices that policymakers face
Yeah.
and how those choices can impact, so many different people and industries,
Yeah.
both within the UK and beyond.
So there you have it. We've gone deep, unpacked the complexities, and hopefully given you some real, aha moments about the UK budget and its potential global ripples.
It's been a pleasure joining you on this deep dive.
And to our listeners, stay curious, keep exploring, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.